They're on the front lines of the pandemic because essential medicine and other critical mail need to get to all of us. But this emergency has devastated the post office's finances. While they're on the front lines of the pandemic because essential medicine and other critical mail need to get to all of us. But this emergency has devastated the post office's finances. While corporations get billions in stimulus funds, the Postal Service got nothing, and it could run out of money soon. That would mean the end of delivery to every address in America. Tell Congress to save the Postal Service, because it's yours. They're on the front lines of the pandemic because essential medicine and other critical mail need to get to all of us. But this emergency has devastated the post office's finances. While corporations get billions in stimulus funds, the Postal Service got nothing, and it could run out of money soon. That would mean the end of delivery to every address in America. Tell Congress to save the Postal Service, because it's yours. They're on the front line.
This is John Bowser Bauman. You know me best probably as Bowser from the musical group Sha Na Na, but more importantly, I'm Senior Advisor to Social Security Works. And today, I want to talk to you about a subject that I couldn't possibly be more passionate about, the United States Postal Service. In the very near future, the workers of the American Postal Workers Union have got to be doing this, because we have got to save the United States Postal Service. Today is a very important day. It is Save the Post Office Day of Action, and all of us are going to be a part of it. The post office has never been more important than it is right now. It's always essential, but especially now in the middle of this pandemic. And as you can well imagine, revenues for the post office have gone way down during this time when people aren't leaving their homes and aren't doing business as much. So we all have to get together. We all are getting together today, in fact, because petitions with 2 million signatures plus on them are being delivered to Congress even as we speak at this moment. Pretty obvious thing, but I do want to bring it up. I've recently done a project myself, which is called the Florida Seniors Organizing Council. And the objective of this project is to ensure that everyone will exercise their franchise this fall and be able to vote by mail. The United States Postal Service, once again, becomes essential in allowing Americans helping Americans to exercise the most important right that they have, the right to vote. So in so many ways, the Postal Service is so important to all of us all the time. And today we have to recognize that the Postal Service really, really is endangered. This is what we're going to talk about during this next time period. I have with me 2 wonderful guests, Mark Dimmenstein, the president of the American Postal Workers Union, and Rana Epting, who is the executive director of MoveOn. And they are involved in this project. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
Great to see both of you. Let's just start out with Mark and talk about why postal workers are out there today, along with many, many other Americans, asking Congress to literally save the post office.
John, the COVID pandemic, obviously has had a huge impact on postal workers themselves. There's 500,000 of us, 4 different postal unions. We represent about 200,000. But postal workers are very proud workers, as all essential workers are, very proud of the mission. And even in the difficult and dangerous times, have been out there serving the people of this country, getting essential medicines into people's homes, medical information, pension checks, stimulus checks, census information, ballots, and voting info. And here, while the postal workers are serving in this time, once again underscoring just how critical the public postal service is to the people of the country. The pandemic has had a huge negative economic impact on the Postal Service, as it has on so much of the country. 40 million unemployed, small businesses deeply affected. And what's happened is, and many of the viewers may not realize this, the Postal Service does not run on tax dollars. It runs on the revenue generated by postage and postal services and products. And that revenue has to be enough, and it has been enough, for the post office to carry out its wonderful mission, delivering to 160 million addresses every day, what we call the universal service mandate, a wonderful small d democratic right, no matter who we are and where we live. The mission of the post office is to bind the country together. And it's been doing that for centuries. And we need to make sure that we can continue to do that moving forward. So what's happened is mail volume has dropped off, not surprisingly, during this pandemic by over 30%. The package volume is up because people have been sheltered in place, but that's a temporary bump. And what's going to happen is the post office is literally under threat of running out of money because the revenue isn't going to be there. And in this situation, because of the crisis, the post office does need congressional appropriated relief to get through this crisis and to get back on its feet. The CARES Act at the end of March, this huge $2.2 trillion stimulus package, generated over $500 billion for private corporations. And yet the post office got nothing. The post office that belongs to all of us. The post office, when we provide funds for, is not providing funds for CEOs or shareholders, it's providing funds to the American people to make sure that we have our essential services, the public postal services. So we're at a crossroads. If the post office runs out of money, everything becomes up for grabs in terms of service. And let's be real, there's 600,000 good living wage union jobs. Good union jobs build stronger communities, We have in the post office equal pay for equal work. Think about that in these times around the fight for racial justice. Equal pay for equal work, no matter who we are, no matter the color of our skin, no matter our gender. All of these things are very important aspects of how important the Postal Service is to the people of this country. So we're out here. Here we are, 2 million signatures. That's an indication of how strongly the people of this country support the Postal Service, not on a Democratic basis, not on a Republican basis. It's an equal, favorable support for the Postal Service. Pew Research has polls every year about rating government agencies. The Post Office always rates the highest. It's the highest it's ever been. It was 91% last month. I think it's an indication that people that there's a deep and new appreciation for what postal workers are doing during this crisis, the trust, connecting people who are so isolated. And that poll of 91%, it was 91% equally amongst those who identified as Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Over 67% of the people in a YouGov poll support appropriated relief to the Postal Service. So this is not a partisan issue for the people of the country. They're united behind the post office, and the petitions we're delivering today sends that message loud and clear to Congress.
And without a doubt, and we'll get to this more specifically later, rural America is served by the post office in ways that no one else serves rural America.
That's right.
And I'm sitting right now in an area, part of California, north of Santa Barbara, California, in the Santa Ynez Valley, where we're entirely dependent on the post office here. And people need to become more aware of this. It's part of the reason this is not in any way a partisan issue. This is an issue for all Americans equally. Right. Rana, why did MoveOn get involved in today's day of action?
Happy to talk about it. Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with both of you and to be talking about the United States Postal Service today, because it is, an American institution. And as Mark said, it's not partisan. All of us rely on it. It's basically one of the purest, most generous institutions in our society. So in terms of MoveOn, for those that may not be familiar with us, we're a 20-year-old organization, and we have millions and millions of people that are part of the MoveOn community, and they live all throughout the country, in every congressional district in the United States, in rural and urban areas. And MoveOn members come together to organize and take action based on a belief that we can create a world that works for all of us. We believe a better country, a better world is possible, and we take action using digital tools over email, mobile, social media, to organize people to come together, to deliver petitions, to mobilize rallies, to make change in this country for the better for all of us. So our members rely on, support, and honestly love the Postal Service and our postal workers. Our members may know us for emails and text messages, but they know the Postal Service for prescriptions, absentee ballots, birthday cards, and so much more. And especially in this coronavirus pandemic, I don't know about you all, but I'm relying on the Postal Service to send letters to my parents and be able to communicate with my family members that I miss so much seeing in person. And at MoveOn, one of our most used tools is our petition platform, where individual folks and organizations can come, they can start petitions on their own on small and large scale issues. And these petitions can show you what folks around the country are passionate about. And so I can tell you, there are a lot of people, we have 2 million at least, that are very passionate about the post office. The petition, which was started by our friends at Rural Organizing, it took off and it garnered unprecedented support from our membership. Hundreds of thousands of MoveOn members signed the demand that Congress fund and preserve the post office. And then hundreds of thousands more have called upon Congress to echo that demand. They've ordered stickers that say, "We love mail carriers," and you can see these stickers popping up on mailboxes all throughout the country. Our members pitched in to run a TV ad in Maine about how essential the post office is, and how our elected officials, including our president and US senators, need to prioritize investing in the post office amidst this economic crisis, as Mark talked about. And it's clear why our members and the people, poll after poll in this country, are so passionate. The post office is a proud example of equity in our country. Postal workers reach all 160 million households and businesses 6 days a week, some 7 days a week, and do so regardless of where you live, how dense or how rural or even how inconvenient the delivery is. And it's personal to me too. My own family members have worked at the Postal Service and have retired recently. My father worked at the post office to get himself through college. It was an incredibly great, wonderful job with an amazing workforce. And the folks who work for the post office are like the kind folks that come to your door day after day. And so when people across the country rely on the Postal Service for communication, medicine, food, and other essential deliveries, and during the pandemic, it's even more important, it's essential that we invest to support this institution, which normally supports itself, but in this economic crisis needs the country to come together and to do something about it, to make sure the post office is there for us for years to come. And so I am proud to stand here today representing the millions of members that have come together to share this demand and want to see us support the post office and postal workers. And yes, this is not partisan. This is something we all can get behind. So that's why we decided to support this campaign.
Well, I want to emphasize to everybody listening out there that pressure on Congress really does work. Phone calls really do work. Call your member, make sure that your voice is heard, make sure that we keep the Postal Service afloat. It's important to all of us. Every political party, every political affiliation needs the post office. Mark, Rana, touched a little bit on the subject of the difficulty of delivering mail in this environment during the pandemic. Can you talk to us a little bit about the challenges that postal workers have had during this time period? It can't have been easy.
No, it hasn't been easy. And postal workers, like so many other essential workers, have been heroes. True with our wonderful healthcare personnel, transit workers, truck drivers, meat packers, grocery store workers, and many more. But postal workers have, it's difficult sometimes getting to work safely. People rely on public transportation in many areas to get to work. Once you're at work, you run the risk of being exposed, and certainly in dealing with the public. When you go to the post office and buy stamps or bring a package or pick up a certified piece of mail or get a money order, there's potential for the disease to be spread, the letter carriers at the doors, businesses. And so it hasn't been easy, but we've had many people sickened. We've had a number of postal workers who have passed away from COVID. It's around 70. We've had many people quarantined, and yet we're still shining through with this wonderful mission that we're so proud to carry out, binding people together. And in times of crisis, the post office is often, and the postal workers are often the first to bring normalcy back to our communities and back to our country. You can see that after hurricanes and floods and fires in California, John. And during the pandemic, often it was the postal worker that was the one person that so many of us sheltered in place actually saw and had contact with. Hasn't been easy, but we're there when we want to make sure we continue to be there for generations to come, and that's where the relief. And it's COVID relief. It's not relief around anything other than the impact of COVID on the finances of the Postal Service. And I think that's important to emphasize. So, here we are, and we want to make sure, and obviously this pandemic and this type of challenge is not going away. We were able to do a lot of things, John, as unions, we're workers who have a voice, and it came out clear as a bell in this pandemic. Workers who have unions and have a voice in their collective organized presence were able to deal with the health and safety issues much better than workers that did not. So we had all sorts of cleaning protocols. We were able to get plexiglass put up between customers and retail clerks. The PPEs, the mask, while there were some gaps in the beginning because the country was not ready, and I think it was grossly mishandled in many cases. But outside of that, some of those beginning hurdles, PPE is there, the hand cleanser is there, social distancing in post offices, wearing of masks. And so we were able to we have a liberal leave policy where people need to be home taking care of a family member. They're not feeling well themselves. They can be off without worry of discipline, without worry about how to put food on the table. Very easy for the CDC, and they're right to say it, that if you're sick, don't come to work. But if you don't have paid sick leave, how do you do that? And I'm diverting a little bit, but one of the things that I hope we get out of a crisis like this, and it is a tragic crisis, but it has opportunity within it, is that we have to have societal-based paid sick leave. It helps not only the individual stay healthy, it helps the rest of us stay healthy. We have to have health care for all because it not only keeps that person healthier, it keeps the rest of us healthier. So we were able to do a lot of good things to help protect not just postal workers, but to help protect the postal customers by negotiating a lot of health and safety issues. And I have to add, the management at the national level of the post office has been very cooperative in trying to ensure that we handle this as safely as possible, given that it's still obviously dangerous times.
There are a lot of issues, a lot of commonalities in the issues that you and I work on a daily basis. When we talk about Social Security and Medicare, these are vastly popular programs all over the country with all political parties, the members of all political parties. We have polling that shows us that 66% of Americans would rather vote for someone who will protect and expand Social Security, protect and expand Medicare is like 64%, 84% to fight to lower drug prices. These things cut across party lines in the same way that the post office cuts across party lines and needs to be supported by every American. One difference in the issues that you work on and the issues that I work on a daily basis, however, is that we are reassuring people that Social Security is, if nothing was done to Social Security, it would be solvent until 2034 or 2035. The post office is in danger right now. That's the reason for this discussion today. The post office needs to be rescued right now, and it does need to be rescued by Congress and the United States government, of which it is a part. So, Rana, what do we really want Congress to do right now?
Yes, so inaction is not an option. That part is very clear. And I also want to stress what Mark said earlier. This is about COVID relief. The United States Postal Service doesn't normally need us to rescue them. They fully fund themselves. But because of the global pandemic around COVID, we're in a particular unique situation, and Congress needs to act. It is a historic crisis. It demands a historic response. Relief and stimulus at an unprecedented scale are needed. We need to do it in targeted ways that help communities most impact and most marginalized. But in particular, around the Postal Service, we need to help shore up the funds for the Postal Service. Now, there is a bill that's passed the House. It's called the HEROES Act, and it provides fully funding the USPS so that it can get through this crisis. The challenge is that it is held up in the Senate by the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He is not moving any legislation in the Senate on COVID relief right now. So there needs to be mounds and mounds of pressure applied on Senator Mitch McConnell to move legislation on this issue, specifically the HEROES Act, which there is a provision that will support the United States Postal Service and relieve the stress on the Postal Service. So we can't wait. It's time to demand that the Senate vote on COVID relief now, because the economic crisis that goes hand in hand with this health crisis is only about to get worse. So I'll also say in Congress, unfortunately, the Postal Service and many issues have been politicized, and we do have some members of Congress that have been trying to undermine the Postal Service for some time. Manufacturing a financial crisis for the post office 14 years ago. They've been putting demands on the system like pre-funding 75 years of retirement accounts that you don't expect of any other agency, much less private corporations. Yet the Postal Service has found a way. This pandemic, however, has piled on new crises into existing crises, and the Postal Service needs immediate cash relief. So the best thing folks can do is call their senators, request that they pass the HEROES Act. It's a bill ready to be passed. They just need to bring it up for a vote in the Senate. And if your senator is a Democrat, you can tell them that you have their back if they push to get this done, because Democrats are already on the record supporting the HEROES Act. If your senator's Republican, tell them that this should not be politicized. This bill needs to pass. Relief is essential now, not next year. And they want to hear from constituents. The more they hear from their constituents, the more pressure they'll feel to push Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to pass this legislation.
We need to move the HEROES Act. That's what it comes down to. And everyone out there can play a part in this. These phone calls really do work. Congressmen feel the pressure from constituent phone calls, and they do respond. The phone calls have to be logged, and the staff has to take them. So please do call your senator, call your House member, and ask them to pass the HEROES Act and pass the HEROES Act now. We have an incredible array of support from all over the country for what we're doing today in this day of action. We're going to hear from some of those supporters who have mobilized their members. First of all, we have a video from Jobs with Justice Executive Director Erica Smiley. And then we have the leader of the Alliance for Retired Americans, Rich Fiesta, for you.
Hey, I'm Erica Smiley with Jobs with Justice. We fully support investing in a public postal service, and we stand in solidarity with postal workers and letter carriers around the country. While we have an office in DC, I actually live in a small community in southern New Jersey. Around here, a lot of my neighbors actually really depend on the Postal Service for everyday needs, from medicine to food to basic contact with family members, particularly during a global pandemic. This is not the time to be pulling the plug on a public postal service. This is the time to be investing in a postal service. At Jobs with Justice, we insist that you take this as an opportunity to invest in a powerful, strong, public postal service. And frankly, everyone around here, my family and yours, many others, count on you to do it.
Hi, I'm Rich Fiesta, Executive Director at the Alliance for Retired Americans, the labor movement's organization for retired union workers and people who think like us, that want to build a better country, a better society, better workplaces while at work in retirement. And it's more critical than ever now to keep the Postal Service alive, functioning, well-resourced, and vibrant. So members of APWU, one of our core retiree groups, can work and go about the business of this country. Retirees, more than any other group, rely on the Postal Service for their prescription drugs. Millions of prescription drugs every week are going through our postal system and being delivered to older Americans who oftentimes can't get to the pharmacy, may be living alone, are isolated in a rural area. And it is that vital link of the Postal Service that is bringing them their necessary drugs, their mail, and their contact with the outside world. So now more than ever, especially during this pandemic, seniors and retirees everywhere need the Postal Service, need it vibrant, need it robust, need Congress to have it funded correctly and adequately, not only for the rest of this year, but for the future as well. This is part of our heritage. This is part of America as much as the Statue of Liberty and the Grand Canyon are. The Postal Service, and now more than ever, Retirees and all Americans need its vital services 6 days a week, regardless of weather or place, delivering mail and the important things that retirees need, like prescription drugs. We are so proud to be with APWU this day, working to make this issue known, not only to Congress, but the American people, on how vital the Postal Service is to all of us. Thank you.
And delivering people Social Security checks. We at Social Security Work see the connection between defending the U.S. Postal Service and defending Social Security, two of the great institutions of America. You know, it's great to hear from all these people. You'll be hearing from more. In the meantime, though, I wanted to ask both of you, what do you think about postal banking? What can we say on that topic, Mark?
Well, we are strong supporters of the Postal Service providing expanded financial services, and in quotes, people generally refer to it as postal banking. There was once actually a postal bank up until between 1911 and 1967. It's not unheard of. It's done with postal systems throughout the world. But to us, you know, the post office has a role in binding the people together and a role in the civic life of the country. It's not set up to make a profit. It's set up where the revenues on a break-even basis serve the people of the country. And here you have, by some estimates, 80 million people that do not have access to banking at all, or what they call underbanked, which means they're in this financial, in this world of these, what they call alternative financial services, which is predatory payday lending, check cashing, preying on the hardworking, low and particularly the low-income, hardworking people of the country. Here, the post office is in every community, trusted, already providing some financial services, such as money orders, and there's no reason why the post office couldn't be there for check cashing on a very reasonable fee, rather than ripping people off ATMs in post offices, bill paying in post office on an electronic basis, transfer of money, whether it's remittances or for other reasons. So the post office is in a great position to do it. It becomes, again, part of the public good and the public commons that the post office is and needs to be even better at. So we are fans. It's a win-win for the post office, for the postal workers. It brings in a little bit more revenue, but more importantly than that, it serves the people in a way that they need to be served. And again, post offices throughout the world are very successful at having financial services part of the postal services. So we hope the post office will get more creative, more aggressive. There are some grassroots demands and movements around the country for the post office to provide, quotes, postal banking, i.e., at least initially, expanded financial services to the people that need it.
Anything you want to add to that, Rana?
I'll just say, want to honor the incredible reliability of the U.S. Postal Service in our society. I mean, the fact that everyone can, if they don't already know their delivery man, is a rare thing for any federal government institution. And it has been one of the most reliable institutions in this country that has supported people to come together, to communicate, to share, to access their prescriptions. And it's incredibly important in this moment, in this crisis, this economic and health crisis that calls on us to meet our postal workers where they need us. It's important that we meet this moment. And the one thing anyone who's watching right now can do, the one thing you can do that is so incredibly powerful is you can call your U.S. Senator.
Absolutely.
You can demand that they pass the HEROES Act now and tell them your personal story about why the Postal Service is so important to you. They really want to hear from real people, and they need to know that this is an issue that crosses party lines. It crosses all different walks of life, race, gender, economic situations, no matter where you live in the country. This impacts us all. And if we can't rely on the Postal Service, then we're dependent on relying on private companies like FedEx or UPS, which are, nothing wrong with them, but it is pay to play there. The U.S. Postal Service is accessible to every single person who lives in this country. And it's an equitable service that we all rely on. So call your senators and make sure that they pass the HEROES Act.
And Ron is really on the money there. It's really about the Senate as we speak. Sure, fine to call your House member too, but the fact is the HEROES Act has passed the House. It is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. So it's really about the Senate at this point. And in order to get the action that we need, it's all about the Senate. Call your senators, especially if you have Republican senators who are resistant to this for whatever bizarre reason, even though it affects all Americans. Please call them today. We need to, as Bowser would say, I can call him in every now and then when I want to. So here he is. Bum 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 dang a dang dang a ding a dong ding. Save the Postal Service. Oh no, it's really good in the morning, and it's still morning here in California.
Yeah.
It's like 8 something. So
sounded good to me.
No, the low notes are better in the morning. This is the perfect time of day for Bowser to speak. Now, last week we saw the AFL-CIO organize massive demonstrations all across the country in its Workers First caravans. And saving the Postal Service was one of the 5 demands of those car caravans and rallies. And I'm sure you saw those car caravans on the news. It was all over the country. Let's hear messages now from AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka and AFSCME President Lee Saunders.
Across the country, U.S. Postal Service workers are serving us during a global pandemic, but they're under attack, not just from the virus, but from their own government. The Postmaster General sent out a dire warning. The Postal Service could face financial ruin by the end of September. Meanwhile, at least 12,000 postal workers have been diagnosed with COVID-19. So why are federal officials letting Postal Service workers get sick and die on the job? Why is our president trying to drive the most popular federal agency into oblivion? It's anti-worker ideology. This president is pushing his own privatization agenda, and it's shameful. And we're not going to sit idly by. Keep the Postal Service solvent is one of America's 5 economic essentials. And just last month, the House passed the HEROES Act, which includes $25 billion for the Postal Service. We need to keep fighting to make this bill the law of the land. And we need to keep fighting to make sure every postal worker is kept whole and the agency is saved. And we can't forget the connection between the Postal Service and our most sacred responsibilities as citizens, the right to vote and the right to be counted. Postal workers delivered census questionnaires to our doorsteps. They deliver mail-in ballots to our homes in dozens of states. So any threat to Postal Service is a threat to democracy. The Postal Service is part of the lifeblood of our communities, and the labor movement will never, ever let it be privatized.
I'm Lee Saunders, president of the 1.4 million members of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We stand in solidarity with postal workers nationwide to save the post office. The post office is truly part of our shared national heritage. It should not be auctioned off to Wall Street or the lowest bidder. Rain or shine, the post office delivers on its promise every day, even though postal workers are on the front line to fighting a pandemic. That's because their mission and values are rooted in public service. So I encourage everyone to stand up to save the post office, keep it under taxpayer control, and fully fund the public services that make America happen.
And obviously, there are postal workers all over America. There are recipients of the mail all over America. Let's get to the obvious topic, which is rural America and the importance of the post office in rural America. You can see behind me on my wall are a bunch of pictures that I took in Alaska. I travel, well, before the pandemic, I did travel quite a lot. I've done shows in all 50 states, but I love going out into nature and into the furthest flung parts of our incredibly beautiful country. And in those furthest flung parts of our incredibly beautiful country, the mail must go through and the mail must be received. So Mark, talk to us about the importance of the post office in rural America.
Well, John, I think it's an indication of how wonderful the universal service mandate is, that the post office must go, and we want it to go to every address, again, no matter who we are or where we live. So here, for the same price, a uniform rate, let's say it's a 55 cents first class letter or a flat rate priority mailbox. It doesn't matter if it's going from one side of your town to the next, one side of the city, or from one end of the country to the other, or the most rural outpost, to or from. Same cost, no surcharges to how long it has to travel, how heavy it has to travel. And so therefore, the Postal Service is very much the heartbeat of rural America. It's the heartbeat of many neighborhoods in urban centers, but in rural America, it does have that special place in our communities to be able to give people that give and take, that connection with the rest of the world, the exchange of information, the exchange of letters, the financial transactions. And in the day of e-commerce, if e-commerce is going to work for everybody, you have to have a national public infrastructure that can also deliver there. Some of the private companies that Rana referred to actually put millions of packages of their own in the mail to get to rural America outpost, so to speak, because they can't make a profit. The post office is not there about profit, it's there for service. And one of the reasons I think we have so much bipartisan support, even in Congress, is because of the role of the Postal Service in rural America. So, for example, a lot of the Republican senators are from rural states, and many of them really do support having a public Postal Service. And it was interesting in the CARES Act back in March, that $2.2 trillion package, there was support on both sides of the chambers of Congress for some real COVID appropriated relief. It was stopped by the White House and the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin in particular carrying out that agenda. And they do have an agenda, and it's shameful that they're using or trying to use a crisis of a COVID pandemic, especially when postal workers are out here doing what we're doing every day, to try to carry out an agenda. And their agenda is in writing. You don't have to listen to Mark Dimmenstein or Rana or Bowser. They put it in writing in June 2018 that they would like to break up and sell the public post office to private corporations for private profit. A few people would be enriched along the way, and the rest of us would be much poorer in the sense of our rights, in the sense of our service, in the sense of our ability to communicate with each other personally and from a business point of view as well. And I think rural America does the role of the Postal Service in rural America helps build that bipartisan support. And that's what we certainly hope will overcome the resistance of this White House and get the kind of relief that's needed. It's also interesting to note that the Postal Board of Governors, which is a Republican majority, every member of the board now has been appointed by this president. They set policy. They have a robust, unanimous, bipartisan request for true COVID appropriated relief. And I think that's an indication that the Postal Service and its role in the country cuts across all ideological views, the whole political spectrum. And we all together have to make sure that nobody can use this as a partisan football to carry out an agenda of breaking up the Postal Service and ending what is not only a historic national treasure, but will be and needs to be a national treasure for generations to come.
And Ron, I think you mentioned earlier that it was really ruralorganizing.org that began the petitions, and have some of the biggest petitions have come in from them, right?
That is true. Rural Organizing is a partner of ours, and they do work to organize folks in rural areas throughout the country to make sure that our government, our elected officials are paying attention to rural America as much as they are in other areas of the U.S. And I'll just say on the rural issue, mail is personal. It impacts all of us. It's how we connect with family members and friends we can't see in person. It's how we take care of our personal needs and medications and food. Mail is how we bring things we need and love into our homes. For folks in rural communities, this is often felt even more acutely. That's why it's the group like Rural Organizing that started the petition on our site. And we all need the Postal Service. But for folks in rural areas, they really need the Postal Service.
Right, exactly.
It's the heartbeat of many communities. And I think, we often don't think about, there's also indigenous people living on tribal lands. They depend on the Postal Service. It's an important means of connection and an essential lifeline. It's a service that serves rural areas without prejudice, no matter where in the country. And in the hands of private companies, if we're gonna, let the United States Postal Service, weaken and rely on the hands of private companies, basically we'll be putting a situation where the price to deliver to rural areas would skyrocket and it'd further cut off people in rural areas. It would just be an international or a national disaster, in my opinion. The Postal Service is intended by the Constitution, is a great equalizer in that regard. And we all have to do our part to save it in this COVID crisis.
So people after my own heart, ruralorganizing.org came up with a bluegrass song about what we're talking about today. So take a listen. This is great.
I'm waiting by the mailbox. They say a check is coming soon. $1,200 to ease the pain and pay a bill or two. But no more aid will come my way unless I take a stand. The U.S. Postal Service darling needs a helping hand. Oh, won't you heed this message? Won't you hear my mournful cry? It's hard to keep your wits about with all this death and dying, but harder times will come our way, on this you can't rely. Unless we learn to not be fooled by all dreadful lies. Our government is doing a disservice to us all. To not deliver us the mail should be against the law. So many men and women out risking their poor lives, delivering goods to our front doors despite these troubled times. They make the rounds to bring us mail, they will come rain or shine. And now it seems the government is leaving them behind. I too have lost my livelihood, I'm struggling day by day. Oh, Uncle Sam won't bail me out while poor crooks are safe. In times like these, it's fair to say we'll need new ways to hope. But if the Postal Service dies, my friends, that's all she wrote. They're well aware of what's to come and choose to do us wrong. If the U.S. Postal Service dies, our right to vote is gone. It's time for us to make demands before it is too late. So pull it from the U.S. Postal Service, for God's sake.
Hey y'all, I'm here in North Carolina, mostly staying inside and not seeing too many people, but you know who I do see every day is the person that delivers my mail. Postal workers are out there on the front lines, courageously providing us a lifeline. And despite what Donald Trump says, that's no laughing matter. It's deadly serious. So I'd like to call on my senators, Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, to honor the 20,000 postal workers in North Carolina and the millions of us who depend upon them by fully funding the United States Postal Service. And I'd like to ask the rest of y'all to join me by contacting your senators to do the same.
Postal Service dies, our right to vote is gone. It's time for us to make demands before it is too late. So pull upon the U.S. Postal Service for God's sake.
Well, there's the message. I hope you got the message and weren't too distracted by the amazing picking that was going on during that song. That was really just, wow, incredible. I should add that the American Postal Workers Union is only one of the 4 unions that are part of the Postal Service. So right now we have a few messages of support from the letter carriers and also from the mail handlers union.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. I am Paul Grogian, President of the National Postal Mail Handlers Union. I want to thank President Dimenstein for his gracious invitation allowing me to speak. Our members, as well as all postal workers, are extremely proud of the essential service that we provide to the American public. This is especially true during this COVID-19 pandemic. More and more Americans are realizing just how important the Postal Service has become in their daily lives. The Postal Service delivers vital prescription drugs, important communications and election materials, and much needed supplies to every address in the United States, 6 and even 7 days a week. People in rural America are extremely reliant on the Postal Service to provide their basic communication needs. Postal employees have been reporting to work every day during the pandemic, risking their health to perform this essential work. Thousands of postal employees have become infected with COVID-19, and thousands more have been quarantined. Unfortunately, at least 67 postal employees have passed away. The Postal Service has been losing billions of dollars because of the pandemic, both in lost revenue and in costs associated with dealing with the pandemic. It is not a question of if, but rather when the Postal Service will run out of cash. The Postal Service needs emergency relief, and we need it now. We know the American public are with us. I want to thank the many organizations who have rallied their membership around this issue and onto petitions. It is time for Congress to act. We have heard the talk before. The time for talk is over. Now is the time for action. Together, we can win this important fight. Thank you.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Fred Rolando. I'm the president of the NALC. On behalf of America's 280,000 active and retired city letter carriers, I bring you greetings of solidarity. Thanks to the APWU and to President Mark Dimenstein for organizing today's Save the Post Office Day of Action. NALC and its members across America are proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in the APWU. According to a recent public opinion poll, the Postal Service is considered the most essential enterprise in America. It provides a vital public service and is needed now more than ever, both to overcome this terrible pandemic and to help our economy recover. The Postal Service is worth fighting for, and we are proud to do so alongside our fellow postal workers and fellow citizens. For nearly 4 decades, the Postal Service has served the country, its businesses, and its citizens without the need for taxpayer funding. But in order to survive this pandemic, we're going to need such funding now. Although our package volumes have temporarily surged with tens of millions of Americans working from home or sheltering in place, the pandemic-induced economic crisis has slashed our letter mail revenues dramatically and has imposed huge new COVID-19 related costs. Our revenue losses will soar into the billions as the country transitions back to work. The Senate leadership must step up to prevent permanent damage to the Postal Service and its invaluable networks. Our leaders in Washington must send a clear signal to the entire country and to the mailing industry that they can be sure that our Postal Service will be there no matter how long this crisis lasts. Our message to the Senate is clear. Pass the HEROES Act and make a commitment to save America's Postal Service.
Thank you. So very briefly, before we run out of time, let's talk about vote by mail a little bit. Mark, we all know, especially with older people, and I am one, I'm 72, vote by mail is going to be a real factor in November. And there seems to be some opposition to vote by mail by actual people who vote by mail, which is odd. But Mark, how safe is vote by mail?
John, it's an extremely secure method of voting. Let me first say, this is not new for the Postal Service. The Postal Service has been delivering mail ballots for generations. Military personnel overseas. There's a number of states that vote by mail is the law of the state at all levels. Oregon has been voting by mail for 19 years with over 100 million ballots cast. The Right Wing Heritage Foundation has found 15 examples of, quote, voter fraud. That's less than one a year, over 100 million ballots cast. So if we go with the record, there are 5 states that vote by mail automatically. Your state, John, no fault absentee ballot. California by itself, I believe, would be the 8th biggest country in the world. Half the people vote by mail. It works, it's secure. There's methods of guaranteeing data would list, there's signatures. The whole idea that it's fraudulent is actually bogus, and postal workers are trusted. The system is trusted. Think back in our lives of how many of our letters have been lost. And you compare that to voter suppression that starts in many ways with elections being on a workday. So working people are already up against it in terms of how to cast a ballot. And so vote by mail also increases participation. All of that's already proven. More people vote when there's vote by mail avenues. And now with this pandemic, it's literally going to make the difference whether people have access. Again, this is not partisan. It's not of who people are voting for, who they're supporting, what candidates, what referendum. It's a question of access to a hard-fought, cherished right. And if we don't have expanded vote by mail, and it's up to the states to do it and do it right. The post office is there to serve. We've been doing it for generations, as I said. If it's increased in this period, and it needs to be and will be, the postal workers are there to serve. We have an oath of sanctity and privacy of the mail. It's actually the last private area of communication left in the country. And people have great confidence in postal workers themselves and in the public postal service. It's literally going to make the difference with millions and millions of people of whether they have access to the ballot box itself.
And one very important point to make is that all 6 states that are likely to decide the next election, and those would be Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida, Wisconsin, Arizona, and North Carolina, all have what's called no excuse vote by mail, meaning that you don't need to have a particular reason. You know, in the pandemic, one of the reasons is pretty obvious, but you don't need a reason. You just have to request, get a ballot, get it back in, vote by mail. The Postal Service is secure. And this is the shape, most likely, of November. And your voice needs to be heard.
Right. And if I can add,
yes,
John, can I add very quickly, because I left this out. It underscores once again, this is one of the many things that the Postal Service does and does well, but it underscores the need to make sure the Postal Service has the support through appropriated relief to get through this crisis.
And that's where we're going back to close out, Rana. If we've talked a lot about the petitions, there are 2 million plus signatures being delivered today to Congress in a series of petitions. But if people haven't spoken out yet, or even if they have, what should they do now?
They should call their senator, and they should demand that their senator pressures Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to pass the HEROES Act. And I'll say, we're talking about vote by mail, there's two reasons. Because the HEROES Act provides funding for the United States Postal Service, and it also provides significant funding to ensure our election systems are strong for the November election amidst the COVID crisis. So it's $4 billion in election money, or I think $3.8 billion, that can be used and allocated to the states to ensure our election systems are strong in light of the COVID crisis. So the best thing any individual can do right now is call their U.S. senator, especially if you have a Republican U.S. senator, and pressure them, tell them they must pass the HEROES Act. It is not a partisan issue. It is about preserving one of our nation's greatest heritages, greatest assets, which is the United States Postal Service. It's about protecting the right to vote amongst a global pandemic crisis. Voting by mail is safe, not just because it prevents you from spreading the virus, but it's safe and it's a protected form of voting, as Mark talked about. It is fraud is very, very low, if any, around vote by mail. And we've been voting by mail in this country for generations. So it's a very secure way to ensure we stay safe health-wise and our vote counts.
So it's not a partisan issue, and yet the message is call your Republican senator. And the reason for that is because grassroots world out there, Democrats, Republicans, independents, all believe in and need the United States Postal Service. For some reason, Republican senators right now, led by Mitch McConnell, are blocking the HEROES Act, which will fund the U.S. Postal Service, and that's what we need. So, just to wrap up, Bowser's coming back in to say, bum 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 dang 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 ding dong ding, save the Postal Service. It's been a pleasure talking to you this morning, and Grease for peace.